One of the best meals I've ever had in my life is called Veal Orloff, but I'm gonna make it even better by using venison. First, I have to get my deer, so watch the hunt, then stick around to see how to cook it up. This is my first time on this piece of property, and my first time attempting to use a crossbow to hunt. I'm not searching for antlers here though. I'm in a deer reduction zone, and my goal is to put meat in the freezer. That evening, I actually see 2 does come about 10 yards from my stand, definitely within crossbow range. The only problem was, this was my first day of the season, and it almost seemed too easy. So I let them walk. Now I've heard it said before, don't pass up a shot on your first day hunting that you'd be happy with on your last day hunting. Well, I ignored that advice, and it's a decision I contemplated for the rest of the season. A couple weeks after my first encounter, I think I might have redemption because there's a big doe coming up behind me, so I start to make my move. But I make too much movement or noise and I blow it. Over the next few weeks, I see lots of other bucks and does, but things just never come together and I never get a good shot opportunity. Now the final days of deer season are upon me, and this time I have my rifle. A group of does comes up behind me, and one pauses in a shooting lane, and I take my shot. From what I can tell, the shot looks good. No matter how good the shot feels, the celebration doesn't start until you see the deer on the ground. And it doesn't matter how many deer you've harvested in the past, coming up to one is a rush of emotions. While I hope that nobody feels happiness from seeing a lifeless animal without context, the truth is that there is a great joy in a successful harvest, and this balances the sadness of having taken a life. I do this because I choose to eat meat as a healthy part of my diet, and I believe this is the most humane way of procuring it. I'm reminded that a life was given for me to eat, but I also know that this deer got to live a life in the wild and as a part of nature, and I got to catch a glimpse of what it means to be a part of it. My mind is now on the food aspect of the hunt. All the wonderful meals I'm going to be able to prepare for my family, all the nearly organic, certainly free-range, ethically harvested meat. For me, there's no better celebratory meal than Venison Orloff. One could think of Venison Orloff as a simplified version of venison Wellington. The difference being that rather than having a puff pastry with a filling of duxelle in between, this eliminates the puff pastry and instead smothers it with even more duxelle, which is a super savory sauce made of mushrooms, onions, and cream. Start with a well-trimmed venison roast of your choice and salt and pepper it well. I'm using top round. You could also use bottom round, sirloin, or if you really want to go all out, go ahead and use half a backstrap. The total weight should be somewhere between 1 and 3 pounds. And the cross-section of the roast should be relatively constant throughout. This means if you're not using backstrap, you'll probably have to truss it like I'm doing here. Set the roast aside and preheat your oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit while we begin the most arduous task of this dish, mincing about 2 pounds of mushrooms. The goal here is for each piece of mushroom to be pretty much the same size as one another. Take the time to do this the best you can, because the mushrooms are going to be the main player in our Duxelles. I know a lot of hunters like the flavor that adding a can of condensed cream of mushroom soup to their venison adds. Well, think of Duxelles as what cream of mushroom soup wishes it could be. Player number 2, and the backbone of our Duxelles, is onion. The onion needs to be diced, and I think this is the best method to ensure a consistent size. Now that we've diced both onions, let's return back to the roast. We're going to be braising the roast, but first we want to get some color on the outside. Use a Dutch oven or a French oven on moderately high heat with avocado oil or vegetable oil in it to sear all the surfaces of the roast. This should take a couple minutes per side. You'll need to use tongs to hold it in place so that you don't get burned from the splattering oil. After all surfaces are browned, transfer to a cutting board and turn off the heat. Now we'll add our white wine to deglaze and provide a liquid for the roast to braise in. After scraping up as much fond as possible, add back the roast, cover, and put it into the 300-degree oven. Your best bet is to use a meat thermometer. You'll want to pull the meat out of the oven when you reach 125 degrees Fahrenheit, since as it rests, the internal temperature will continue to rise. Now melt 4 tablespoons of butter in a large pot on medium heat, and once the water has evaporated, add your onions. You want to gently saute them over time to develop a lot of color. The caramelization is necessary for our Duxelles. After only 20 minutes, my roast was at 125 degrees. Admittedly, this roast is trimmed to be quite small, and my heavy French oven had a good amount of carryover heat from the browning, so this is about as fast as you would expect it to cook. I'm gonna allow the roast to rest covered on a cutting board now. The internal temperature will rise about 10 degrees, and then it will begin to cool again. Now after about 20 minutes, the onions are nicely browned, and I have a good amount of fond on the bottom of the pot. I'm going to add about a 1/4 cup of the cooking broth to deglaze the pot. After the liquid has mostly evaporated, add all of the mushrooms and stir. This will take a while to cook down. Once most of the water has cooked out, season with salt and pepper, add the cream, and stir to combine. At this point, you're probably thinking, gee, that's a lot of butter and cream. Yes it is, and it's delicious. Now that the Duxelles has cooked down to pretty much the consistency we're looking for, we want to check it once more for our seasoning. In my case, I still needed more salt and pepper and just a splash of acidity from the cooking broth. A final taste confirms that we're good on seasoning, and this is how it should look. Now turn off the heat and set aside. Turn the oven on to 400 degrees Fahrenheit and return back to the roast to uncover and remove any kitchen twine you used. Now slice vertically into approximately 3/4 of an inch thick pieces. Then carefully transfer the sliced roast back into your cooking vessel and take note of the doneness that the meat is cooked to. I'm right between rare and medium rare, which is pretty much right where I want it. Now we're going to introduce our roast to its most complimentary sauce, the Duxelles. Create a small gap between each slice and fill each space with a liberal spoonful of Duxelles. Then lather it on all exposed surfaces. You really can't put too much on it, so pile it high. This recipe will give you plenty to work with. Leave uncovered and pop it in the oven for 5 minutes to set the duxelle and give it a nice sheen. You can add a few minutes if you need to bump up the doneness, or skip this step altogether if you don't want to risk cooking the meat any bit further. Perhaps not the prettiest of dishes, but a nice mix of rugged and refined. Spread out the sliced venison on a serving platter and garnish with some thyme or another herb. Pair with a high-acid wine to cut through the richness and share with those who deserve it. If you liked this video, please like it and subscribe.